neighborhoods do suffer from the lack of mentorship and having after school programs, or they do limit the ages. And I believe Lanisha said that some people limit the ages between, 8 or 14 versus, like we were saying, like maybe suggesting people can up the age from, 8 to 18. So everybody has an opportunity. And I believe, I forgot what the last question was. What was the last question?
Are you spirit possessed?
We all said to a certain extent. I think most people of color are, because we had to act a certain way in order, aka white, in order to fit into the box of having opportunities. Like we can't speak a certain way, we can't dress a certain way because we won't fit into that box of whiteness.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Armand. Who else like to share what's discussed in their breakout rooms?
I couldn't, I was in the group that the last girl just talked about. Okay. I couldn't say what I had to say for the last question. I feel like for a lot of interviews, we dress a certain way to like get the job. And I feel trapped because I want to express how I really am. And then I can't because they're like, damn, this bitch is ghetto, So I can't even, but it sucks. But then like I got a new boss that he doesn't care if we cuss, My old manager and my captain, like I'll like say a little cuss word, I'd be like, damn, they forgot my fucking orange juice. They'd be like, watch how you speak, and then my new boss be like, fuck this, fuck that, and it's cool because it's a different vibe. Like, we get to chill at work and, like it's better to like have fun at work than to be, miserable. So I feel like they're spirit possessed or something.
No, yeah, I think you get the essence of what the authors are trying to argue and I think more profoundly, right, you say for interviews you put on the attire of spirit possession, which is really profound. So to me, that lets me know that you really grappled and understand the argument that's being laid down. Let's get one more and then we'll move into my notes.
I got one, Professor. Okay, so for me, in our group, the one thing I kind of spoke about was the implications for Devontae. All right, so from what I read, it seemed best to me that the solution or the best support for Devontae is to meet him where he's at, right? Like not the idea of trying to change him. The process of assimilation and code switching. We see that all too often. This whole narrative and idea of how people are supposed to act, talk, and it's all attributed to whiteness. And I think that's across not just Black people. I think that goes for everybody. Every culture that I could think of, Latinx, Asian is it kind of looks up to whiteness, right? Whiteness is has a standard. And so if you can act white or dress white or whatever the hell, you're gonna be all right, you're gonna make it. So for Devontae, I thought, well, the idea is to meet him where he's at. Don't change him, position him to be the best version of himself. You know what I'm saying? Because in Devontae, being Devontae, he can achieve Black excellence without, being white or trying to be white or trying to fix his linguistics and how he uses language and stuff like that. You can achieve. And so the first person that popped in mind, right, and I know you're familiar with Professor, but I want to encourage people in this class, if you're not familiar with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, right? I've heard him keynote twice. He's like the best person I've listened to him keynote. He kills it. Like, what I'm saying? He's an intelligent, sharp brother. He has about 30 books out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a high level intellectual, right? For the Black community, yet he's not walking around here talking white. I mean, I promise you'll be blown away, man. I want to encourage people to look. He got videos out. I'm waiting on him. We got to get him to Cal State LA, Professor. I mean, the brother's sharp, and the thing is, he's not code switching. He's not out here trying to be white. He denounces whiteness. He'll talk shit about Trump, regardless who's the sponsors is. And he's a high level intellectual. So that's the first thing pointed out to me when you talk about, a person who best version of themselves without code switching to something, he the first person came to mind.
Yeah. And like a lot of his lectures and talks he gives, he's rapping. Like he'll straight up like rap. Like in the tone of his speech is hip hop, man. Like you could tell he's someone who grew up in the culture and is a byproduct of hip hop culture, and he has not allowed the academy to displace who he really is. So I think that's a spot on call out. So yes. Okay, let's go into my notes about this. And Armani, I'm gonna kind of pick on y'all a little, your group a little bit, as far as the solutions that you all offered. So don't take it personal. It's just for intellectual practice. So one, first and foremost, right, the objective of the article, right? The current objective of the work is to recalibrate, if not dismantle, current notions of African student success that are often defined or positioned as going to college and graduating from college, right? So this is the objective, right? What we seek to do within this article is dismantle, take it completely apart, right? Recalibrate, get it more astute and more precise, right? This current idea that African student success is going to college and graduating college, right? This is what we're seeking to do within this. And it says, one, right? Schooling is a system and an institution that by design commits cultural genocide. Okay, so by design, if you're successfully going through this process of schooling, you're gonna come out with your culture stripped from you, right? Your language, your dress, how you position yourself will be stripped from you and more recalibrated towards whiteness or to a proximity of whiteness, okay? And then from there, they kind of go into the work of John Ogbu. We should be familiar with the work of John Ogbu because we engaged his work a few times within this semester, and this idea that African students liken academic success to whiteness, right? And then again, they counter this notion by affirming that no, in fact, what Ogbu is doing is conflating schooling and education. And in fact, what African students are pushing back against is not education, but it's pushing them back against schooling, right? And then they gave us the post-traumatic slave syndrome. They gave us transgenerational transmission of trauma and this idea of epigenetics, right? And one may ask, why does this become central for the argument that's being laid out as it pertains to schooling being a conduit for spirit possession? And they argue, or they posit that epigenetics, transgenerational transmission of trauma, and the post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? They may be able to be explained or better understood by understanding the work of the spirit, right? Because the spirit may in fact be that how can I call it? It may be that conduit, right? That allows these things to be passed down from generation to generation. Maybe it's a spiritual transmission, right? Opposed to being a genetic transmission or things of that nature. So this is why the placing epigenetics, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and transgenerational transmission of trauma on the table becomes important. And more importantly, they argue, or they offer, so that future scholars can kind of pick up this work and do this work centering on the potential of the spirit, okay? And then he kind of moves through the work of the autobiography of Malidoma Patrice Somé in the book of Water and the Spirit, and where Malidoma is kidnapped from his African village, took into a French Jesuit seminary school. He breaks away from the school and returns home. And they say, you didn't return home as someone who learned the way of the white man or someone who worked for the white man, but as an actual white man, right? This is how they viewed Malidoma upon his return to his native village. And this, for Dr. Bush and myself, right, we situate this as an example of how schooling can, in fact, make you white, right? Because Maldoma's elders, Maldoma's members of the community, they didn't see the Maldoma that they knew who left here, right? They viewed a white man who has occupied Maldoma's body. And then they move through, you know, the work of the lion and the example that's given, and also could be the lion can be used as a metaphor for Devante, right? And it asks the question, you know, how do we view indicators that we may consider as maladaptive, right? Sagging, low test scores, high dropout rates, right? And it goes back to the question that was posed, sorry, not for your guys' group, but for group B, I posed last week, right? It's like, if we want the lion to remain a lion, is it the fact that he drops out of school really a bad thing, right? Is the fact that he doesn't test well necessarily a bad thing, right? Is it the fact that he's defiant in these spaces of schooling a bad thing? We argue no. In fact, that's the lion doing what the lion's supposed to do, right? So when you see Devante cutting class, when you see Devante sagging, when you see Devante talking shit back to his teachers, right? It may not be him just being deficit or him just being maladaptive, but it may be Devante trying to maintain his African essence. That may be Devante trying to guard his spirit against the possession of schooling, right? Which begs to the fore the question, what is success for African students, right? Is it going to school, getting the education, getting the degrees, getting a PhD, right? For those familiar with the work of Carter G. Woodson, which this work that we just read builds on, the miseducation of the Negro, right? Carter G. Woodson argues that to go to school to get your PhD is to further separate yourself from the community that produced you. In fact, placing you in closer proximity to this idea, this notion that we call whiteness. For those that don't know, and they'll tell you once you get into a PhD program, right? Their job, their task is to break you down, strip you of how you think of what you think you know, and how you think you know what you know, and build up in you their frame of reference for what you know and how you think you know what you know, right? So if that is not a form of possession, as is argued in the article, I don't know what is. And these are things that I was told myself, right? Going through a PhD program. So then that brings it back to the last question I asked you all in your breakout rooms. Are you possessed by the spirit of schooling? How much of a proximity to whiteness do you try to position yourself to attain success, right? And going back to Armani's suggestion of after school programs and providing more opportunities for those who are in underprivileged areas, right? So if we are to take the line of thinking that the article positions us, right, to provide them more opportunities, to provide them more after school programs, so to speak, is just giving them more access to whiteness, right? Maybe, just maybe, those who are in these underrepresented or underprivileged areas that don't have access to these spaces of schooling, maybe they're better off because they are not in a position for their spirit to be captured. Let me see, looking at the chat. In my PhD program, how do I deal with the possession, with possession? So for me, Luis, the way that I think about this, fortunately for me, I got my bachelor's and my master's from Cal State LA Pan-African Studies, right? Because I was already baptized, if you will, in the spirit of Pan-Africanism. I was already very much solidified and grounded in my Africanity. So when I got into those spaces, and within the first week or two of me being in classrooms, I had to come across this idea that African people are destined to be permanent slaves, right? That African people are inhuman, right? And that their only purpose on this planet is for enslavement. These are conversations that I'm having in my PhD program. Because of the grounding that I got through Pan-African studies, right? I knew that was bullshit. And I had the intellectual wherewithal to combat these type of thinkings. So to answer your question more directly, the way I was able to deal with the spirit possession, I had already gone through my exorcism before I got into my PhD program, right? So I already done the work of getting that spirit out of me. So that way, when I move into the space that held my PhD program, that as best as it could be, right? Because I don't think anyone could completely remove that little white man from inside their head. As best as I could be, it was kind of eradicated. Looking at the chat again, do you think would be the alternative if they did not attend school? So let me ask you, so Armani is asking, what do you think the alternative would be if they do not attend school, right? So let me ask you all, I'm gonna turn it back. What does the article offer as a solution to schooling? Because really what they're saying is we need to get out. That's why it's entitled Get Out. That's why the movie, right? We built this article on the movie because what Chris had to do was get out of that house. And what we're arguing is what we need to do is get out of these schooling institutions. So I'm going to ask you all to respond to Armani's question that she placed in the chat. What's the alternative then? What's the last section of the reading? Does anyone know what the last section of the reading is? Because in there, you'll find the answer to Armani's inquiry. So the solution is a pedagogy or a practice of exodus and exorcism, right? So that's the alternative, Armani. If we're gonna, let me do it this way. I'll rephrase it. So another way to think about this is the distinction between schooling and education, right? So we already know what schooling is doing, right? As the article articulates it, it's going to produce cultural genocide, right? Whereas education, education is going to allow you to be more in tune with your cultural specificity, right? Education is designed to bring out of you the divinity that lays latent within you, right? So this pedagogy that they're offering that provides exodus and exorcism, right, should be a pedagogy of education that will allow you to tap into your divine, that would allow you to be grounded in your cultural specificity, right? So this is the solution that's being offered by the authors of this particular article, right? And I agree with the solution so much that it informs my personal PhD work, right? So what I'm trying to do is produce a pedagogy of Pan-Africanism, a Pan-African pedagogy that will do the work of exodus and exorcism, right? So that's the alternative. This space that we have within Cal State LA that we call the Department of Pan-African Studies is a department that produces pedagogy that is of exodus and exorcism. The work that we do within this classroom is to exorcise that demon of white supremacy that lies within all of us, right? To get rid of that, right? To remove that, to decolonize this type of thinking and positionality, right? So that is what I would offer to you as a solution. And that's what I would offer as a solution. If there's no questions, we'll just transition into our fishbowl. We could talk about my notes, you could talk about the breakout rooms, or you could read from your journals, all that's on the table. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer for the fishbowl?
Can I add a comment to Armani's question?
Yes, please.
I feel like if our children don't go to school and the parents, homeschool them, I feel like they will learn much more and be themselves, because they're not gonna follow like, you know, the common like, you know how in school like they have little rules, you know, they'll be at home in a safe space where they could be themselves, and their parents are actually going to teach them like from their culture and whatnot, and like not lose their roots. I feel like that'll be pretty cool, honestly.
You know, and to be honest with you, and especially recently, the number of homeschooled children have increased drastically just because of what you just said, right? Especially from people of culture, they don't see the value of placing their students in psychological, spiritual, and even physical harm by these schools, right? Something as silly as because of how your hair is, you're getting kicked out of school or you're being assaulted because you have locks or braids, right? So you're absolutely spot on in your interpretation of ways we could alleviate the ills of schooling. Destiny, we have your hand for fishbowl. Anai, I'm gonna just throw that what you just said in as your fishbowl comment, okay? And someone else just raised it. Ishmael will be our fishbowl. Does anyone else want to volunteer? And Ryan, okay. So we have Destiny, Anai already went, Ishmael, Ryan for our fishbowl. Who else would like to go? I'm sorry, who wants to start us off or go after Anai, I should say?
I can go.
Okay, thank you, Destiny. Go ahead.
So I kind of wanted to talk about the possession, the spirit possession, and how it kind of affects my life. So my family's of Mexican descent. My grandpa was from Mexico, but my grandma was white. And when my grandpa was alive, you know, we still had that touch of our culture, but I still felt like I wasn't Mexican, if that makes any sense. Like my whole family, we went to Catholic school, you know, so we had a lot of the church and it really enforced whiteness. And it's kind of sad because a lot of my family is so like, what's the word? Focused on that, you know. We're all trying to get out of where we're from, like Pico, we're from Pico Rivera. And it just makes me sad, you know, because as I'm taking these classes, it makes me want my culture back. It makes me want to feel like I actually am Mexican because, you know, I am. It's honestly so bad that I can't even pronounce my last name correctly. I've had many people correct me on how to say it. It's kind of sad. But I think I am definitely possessed. My family is definitely possessed by that spirit. So taking these classes has really helped me get that exorcism. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Destiny. Also kind of just being vulnerable to share that with us. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure that takes some courage. So I appreciate that. Who's next?
Oh, sorry. You can...
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
You go, Ryan. You go.
Oh, just to further speak on Destiny, because I have similar experiences, and my family, my grandpa's from Mexico, and my mom is like third or second generation, and I grew up like wanting to be whiter, and I think like even people my friends and stuff and people I talk to, and my mom also, I really believe that she taught me that, like she wanted me to be whiter, and including not wanting me to speak Spanish because she didn't think I would need it. And I think like now I am realizing that, like from a few years ago I started realizing it more. And it's interesting. Well, it's because there is a lot of anti-Black and even anti-Indigenous and Latin and Hispanic culture, and it's like it's constant. So I feel like I just wanted to share that to Destiny.
And I'm just looking at the chat real quick, just kind of interject. Destiny saying how it's sad that she doesn't speak Spanish, but like let's not get it confused. Like Spanish is a colonial language. Like you know what I mean. So
yeah,
all you're doing, Destiny, is changing one colonial language for another. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was just more of because like that's like I guess the language that everyone speaks. You know, it's like their language now. So it's like
people
like,
used people used to say like, oh, like they would make fun of me, like, oh, why don't you speak Spanish or something? But in the end, it is still a colonized language. So
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of that. Like, oh, well, you don't even speak Spanish. Like, why don't you speak Spanish? And it's like, my family didn't want me to know it. Simple as that.
yeah. And I guess I definitely understand though, like, so English will put you in a closer proximity to whiteness than Spanish will, right? So I get where you're coming from with that, but again, like, let's not get into the confusion of, oh, I'm more liberated because I speak Spanish. Like, nah, that's not really how that works, right? Thank you, both of you. Ishmael?
Yeah, for me, it's in relation, I guess, to the third question as well, like spirit possession in schooling when I was at a younger age. And I think I very much remember like the 2008 election as a kid, watching it on TV, Obama, the celebration. It was like, oh my God, this is amazing, and thinking that as a kid, I was really like, wow, this is great. Like, we're going in a great direction. And now further on, I'm a political science major, learned way more things. And I was looking at Obama and I'm like, wow, like, it's just identity politics. It was, no real substance of change actually occurred, for the most part. He did, just was pretty much any other standard politician. Just in my view, he just happened to be black, and he was a great speaker. And I really noticed that too. And when was it? When the NBA went on strike.
Mm-hmm.
And Obama was the one that actually convinced them to end the strike. And I was like, what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised by that. I was like, I would have thought the opposite. And yeah, I guess, yeah, I realized that through my schooling. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ishmael. That's what I would like. That's great contemporary analysis, right? Ishmael, are you familiar with neocolonialism? Neocolonialism.
Yes.
That's Obama, right? Like, so what you do is put a black face on colonialism. Yeah. My yeah, like I'm gonna say my mentor when I was at Cal State LA doing my undergrad work, and I was a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Didon Kamathi, and he used to say that Obama was black Vaseline. Okay, so if you know Ice Cube's hip hop, he had a diss record called No Vaseline. So in other words, excuse me for being crude, but just to kind of give y'all the reference, I'm gonna fuck you with no Vaseline, right? So my mentor would call Obama the black Vaseline. So you're getting fucked, right? But at least Obama's gonna make it feel better because he's gonna give you that lubricant while you're getting fucked, but you're still getting fucked, right? And I think that is what Ishmael's talking about. It looks good, it sounds good, but it doesn't translate to any change in the material conditions of the people who are placing him in office, right? I want to kind of circle back to, yep, same thing with Kamala. Kamala was worse because that's a whole nother conversation, her drunk ass. I want to circle back to something that LJ had said earlier in regards to, all cultures are dealing with this component of spirit possession. And I'm going to throw an amendment on that. I would argue that the other cultures outside of Black, they have they're more open to spirit possession, right? Because they have the outer shell that allows them at least to look and say, well, damn, I kind of look white, right? So I want to kind of throw dubs on LJ's point. And if you listen closely to what Destiny was saying, to what Ryan's saying, they're echoing that sentiment, right? They're saying because phenotypically, I look white, right? People are conditioning me to believe that I have the potential to aspire to whiteness, right? Whereas for me, I know this shit ain't getting nowhere close to white. Even it's not happening, right? Like it's a fabulation, right? And that doesn't mean that African people don't try it, right? Because that's why bleaching creams and things of that nature are so prevalent, especially in spaces like the Caribbean and Africa, right? But for those who phenotypically could look white, is even more of a neurosis because they look like those who we identify as white, right? Yeah, so I do want to open this up to a broader conversation. We could discuss anything that we've covered so far, the article, the conversations, the notes, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about the article within the last 15 minutes. Go ahead, Cherie.
So what I discussed in my class, I mean in my breakout room, is that I all of my life, like I've been to the ghetto schools, like that's just what it is. It's in the hood of NorCal. That's where I'm from. So I've always had a Black principal, Black teachers and things like that. And I think like my mom, she's fortunate enough to have a degree in several things. So I've always been told like, oh, you speak white or this and that. But from my counterparts, like Black children, other Black children, my high school was predominantly Black and Mexican. And we had white teachers and things like that. However, until I got to Cal State LA is when I realized that even though I have been going to these quote unquote ghetto schools, like I too have lost a lot of the imagination that I had when I was younger as far as that. And then I come from an Ethiopian background because my grandpa is Ethiopian. And I mean, all they do is speak Amharic around. So they'll teach us, you know, here and there periodically and things like that. But as far as like seeing the way of how school does coerce you to be in this like plant, like to have this potted plant, like you're the plant, you can't go anywhere else, you're just stuck in this pot, is like it gets pushed over so many times, like you said, with blackface, like President Obama, oh, a Black man, so trust him, you know, or get the Black vote. Like that's why there were so many people voting. And then you have artists, the people that people look up to, saying, oh, go out and vote, and we vote for a Black man. And yet the hood is still the hood. It's not a changing of anything. It's just say these words and this and that, and it's like you got to give a lot and you get a little. And then it's like with school, like just like the article, it's like you feel like you like, even if you try your hardest as a Black person, it's like you have to end up trying to be like a white person to get ahead. And then it doesn't make you feel good, but then it's like you're so used to it, you get conditioned to it, and then that's just what it is.
Yeah. So in lieu of Cherie's comments, and also I want to kind of tie this to something that Anai had said earlier. Have I gave y'all the code switching assignment in this class yet?
Okay. No, I don't think so.
Okay, so this is every class I have, this is some homework that I always give out. Do this though. Be careful in how you go about trying to execute this assignment. In normal spaces where you would feel the need to code switch, whether that be how you speak, how you dress, how you position your body, whatever the case may be, don't. See how it feels for you, first and foremost. See how it feels for you, and then be attentive to how others are responding to your lack of code switching, right? This is twofold. One, to get you to realize like, yo, it feels good when I'm just my normal self, right? And two, by and large, you'll see that others will adapt to your authentic self, right? My life is a example of not code switching, right? Like how I talk to y'all is how I talk on the street, how I talk in my PhD classes when I'm a student. I don't switch that shit up for nobody, right? If I'm going into a job interview, this is who they get, right? So that way, when I come to work that day, that first day, they're not surprised about how I'm getting down, right? Because it's how I've always gotten down. So I'm gonna encourage you all to do the same thing, not when you typically code switch, don't. But don't get your ass whooped and don't get fired from your job. That's the parameters I'm placing on this, right? As long as you can be safe, and long as you could maintain your economic support, try it. Push those boundaries and see how that feels and see how others respond to you. And then we'll come back and have a discussion about that next week. Cherie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just what you were saying. I actually had an experience. So my best friend, she's Mexican. She's fair-skinned Mexican. I had just bought my second car, and we went to the the dealership because I bought it off the lot, and everyone kept coming in there to say, oh, congratulations on your new car. She's like, this is her car, like it's not my car. And we looked at each other because she's like from the hood too. So I'm like, okay. And so the guy, I was fortunate enough to have a large sum of money to put down on my car. And he's like, so where did you get all this money from? I said, oh, I sell drugs and I pimp her out on the weekend. And he stopped completely. And my best friend, like we're together forever. And she's like, oh yeah, that's what we do. And I mean, the whole time I'm signing papers, he didn't say nothing else. But I'm like, you wouldn't ask a white woman where she got the money. So I was like, if FBI ain't coming behind me asking, hey, we need to take you in handcuffs, what you in my business for? Yeah. You wouldn't ask her. And then he kept directing his questions towards her. And she's like, no, that's her car. But yeah, when he asked me that, I told my mom, she was like, good, I'm proud of you. Because she was like, ain't nobody's business of why you got the money. But yeah, that's like the first time, I mean, that I had actually done it, but now I do it all the time. Like if I peep some shady stuff or, oh, you speak really well for yourself, I'm like, it's called education. Everyone has it. But I mean, like, I'm the shady queen as far as me recognizing when people try to do too much, like that guy. I was like surprised. I was like, wow. But yeah, that was my experience. It was funny. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, my grandmother told when she was buying the house that I'm in now, she told him that she sell pussy on the side. That's how she got her money for the house. Alexandra?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about the article a little bit more. So in the article, it says that we should be abandoning schools and institutions. But I was wondering, I feel like the best way to go about this would be to do the educating piece or the exodus and then entering into these institutions or schooling, because I feel like where young Black people are going to be advocated for the most, or when you get into these positions of power to influence them. So do you agree that schooling and all of that should just be totally refuted? To me, I feel like that would be taking us, or Black people, so far back where there were leaders like who like Mary Church Terrell who like advocated for education.
So again, Alexander, we have to be very, very, very specific about the distinction between schooling and education, right? I have no problems with taking all of us out of schooling. I genuinely don't. Because I have a very comprehensive understanding, I'll say overstanding, of African people's relationship to education. When we could not be educated, right? When it was a crime for us to be educated, where you would lose fingers and hands, right? We would still do the work of being educated. We would sneak off to do that. We would steal ourselves away to be educated. So if we were to take away these institutions that we call schools, education would still be taking place. They had these things called like freedom schools, right? Where African people would sneak off into the woods and educate themselves. I would affirm or assert that would be more proliferated if we were to remove ourselves from these schoolings. I'm also going to piggyback on Anai's comments around homeschooling, right? So what you're talking about of us pulling ourselves out of schooling, it's already happening. And what we're doing, instead of going to the schools, we're just training our children within the home, right? So the education is still taking place. It's just not happening but under the parameters of this institution that we call the schools. Yes, I agree with you in the sense of having someone like educated, right, and then infiltrate the schooling systems. But by and large, I don't know how many people have the intellectual, mental, and spiritual fortitude to fight off the possession that the schools give you to be that spook who sat by the door, if you will, right? Like that's the work that I'm trying to do. That's what got me here, right? I stole the information from the universities to be able to place myself here to be in a position to exercise y'all, right? To get that spirit out of you. So that's happening, but I don't think at a large scale level. I think if we were to do that in a sense of trying to go through schooling, right, maintain our African spirit and then like be a double agent, so to speak, I think that would, by and large, would have more casualties than we would have successes, right? So I think more people would come out possessed than they would being able to serve as that double agent. So that's why, for me, I'm all on board with establishing a institution that does education opposed to these institutions of schooling. Does that answer your question, Alexandra?
Yeah, it answers it. Thank you.
All right. So I'm gonna post a interview on Google Classroom by Thursday or Friday. It will either be, I'm trying to think if I want to go with Nip or Malcolm. It'll be either Malcolm, Nip, or Tupac. And it might be James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. So I'll post it by Thursday or Friday. That will be your assignment for next week's. And we'll have the same process as we do this way with just the video. Yeah, yep. But think about this, Ryan, like they are part of the institution, right? So if they're gonna acknowledge that this is a white supremacist institution, then they're complicit in the white supremacy, right? And then at that point, they're progenitors of white supremacy. So it's easier not to acknowledge it, right? But you're absolutely right. All right, y'all.